Our next session is Inside the AI Echo Chamber, Exposing Big Tech's Dystopia. Please welcome our speaker to the stage.
Hi. He could make it. I'm kidding. I'm Natalia Antelava. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Coda Story. And this morning, when I was listening, when Antonio was cheering us all up with his incredibly effective and eloquent summary of the state of the world we live in, it made me think of a little paragraph, a blurb that I wrote describing why we were building Coda and why we were setting it up 10 years ago. That blurb is still on our website, and it said at the time, "At the heart of our coverage lies the changing landscape of power, the expanding geography of authoritarianism, the abuse of technology, the manipulation of scientific facts, the rise of oligarchy, the weaponization of historical narratives, and how they all interconnect." That was 10 years ago. It was really hard to get any funding for any of these themes. Now it's a bit of an overcrowded field. But Coda's mission is to keep identifying the new patterns. We are the early warning system, and we've developed a bit of a framework and a methodology, editorial framework, really, to keep looking at the undercurrents, things that are bubbling under the surface. What we've learned doing this work is that we as journalists cannot really do it alone. So we've been experimenting a lot with collaborating with people outside of media and journalism, with historians and philosophers, with actors, with theater directors, with technologists. The collaboration that we'll be talking about today is one of my favorites. I think many of you will remember Christopher Wylie for his pink hair, which you can't see in this photo. But I think all of us should remember Christopher Wylie for doing all of us a huge favor by bravely blowing the whistle on Cambridge Analytica back in 2018 and forever reframing the way that we understand democracy in the digital age. So we teamed up with Chris to investigate Silicon Valley. And we wanted to look not at what they were doing, because we already knew that what was happening was essentially a capture by that industry, the big tech industry, of all aspects of our lives. We really wanted to understand why and how we were being captured. So the investigation which resulted in this podcast, which hopefully you will all listen to, looked at different aspects of this capture, including the media. And to do the media part of it, we decided to get together with Chris in that place where so many of us go on an annual pilgrimage, Perugia. So we arrived in Perugia. You can hear some of the people clearly. The Perugia goers are laughing. It's a bit of like a collective therapy session for journalists every year. So we arrived, our team of reporters, the editorial team arrived in Perugia, and we were waiting for Chris to get there, and he was flying from Dubai. And Dubai got hit by massive floods. So he made several attempts to get to the airport, and he couldn't, and it was all very dramatic, and he was sending us messages from the airport and from the flooded streets of Dubai, and he was telling us how at the same time all these tech bros were flying into Dubai while no one could fly out, and he couldn't make it out, but the tech bros who flew in threw a massive party that Chris, being a tech bro himself, got invited to. And I want to play for you a message that he sent to us from that party. If we could play the clip.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me. I'm in the toilet at this event, and it's interesting because people here, they're talking about longevity, how to live, like, if not for a long time, how to live forever, but also prepping how to prepare for when people revolt and when society gets completely undermined. And the thing that I think about is you have in another part of the world a bunch of journalists talking about how to save democracy. And here you've got a bunch of tech guys, tech bros, thinking about how to live past democracy and survive.
Never made it to Perugia, but luckily he did make it to London. So let's put our hands together and get Chris to join me on stage. Hi.
Hi.
We've done this quite a few times, but to be honest, we've never done it just the two of us on stage. Have we?
Usually we're like sitting on a sofa with people.
Yeah, it's fun. Before we begin, we will be taking questions, I was told. So as they come up, please send them in. And I've been given the magic iPad. I will try to get to as many of them as possible. Chris, can we just start? Can you just tell everyone here, what have you been up to since you blew the whistle? Because you sort of disappeared for a while, and I think people have wondered what happened to you.
Yeah, so I'm not like a full-time whistleblower. That was sort of a moment in my life, but anytime I go to events, it's the first thing that people say that I am. There's not much money in blowing the whistle. So like I work in tech. I have my own company. We service large companies building algorithms, mostly in prediction and also computer vision. So I very much have a day job in tech, or as you put it, being a tech bro.
And since 2018, when you look back, what did blowing the whistle achieve? I mean, I think it gave us a lot because I think it truly did reframe how we understand things. But from your point of view, are you disappointed? Are you glad you did it? Like, where are you? I actually never asked you this question.
I think I was incredibly naive to even become a whistleblower. You kind of have to be to sort of take that on. What I thought before Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and all of that was like that, in like movies, when there's like some big problem, there's like someone in the government and there's like a crack team and they know what to do. And if you just, there's some disaster and the guys sit down in a boardroom and like, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to handle it. And so I kind of very naively thought that, there's going to be somebody in the US government that, looks at election integrity, that looks at, the cybersecurity of a country. And, when you had all of this data being abused to, propagate disinformation, all these connections with Russian intelligence, going all the way directly to the Trump campaign, that there would be somebody, there that could, take it on. And what I discovered was that there was no plan. There was nobody looking at that. And when I blew the whistle, I saw how unprepared even like the most powerful country in the world is to these sort of emerging threats when it comes to data abuse and AI, disinformation. I remember being at like a press conference and the number of times I would have to like explain what does disinformation mean. Like now it's like you see it every day in the newspaper. Back then it wasn't like, there was no disinfo beat, there was no AI beat, there was no, and so I learned that both in terms of government, but also our wider sort of civil institutions like journalism, were not really prepared for this topic. And since then, I think what the scandal did was really mainstreamed the idea that data is powerful. It's not just for page 8 in the like tech column of your paper, that this is like the infrastructure of society now. This is the infrastructure of democracy. And that comes with also threats that have emerged. But there hasn't really been substantive, legislative change or legal reforms. The United States is still the only OECD country that doesn't have like a national privacy law. You have debates, even in the United States, around whether or not like protecting children should, that's still controversial. Protecting children online, that's how sort of deeply partisan everything is. So, I think.
So you're saying that we're still not prepared for what is coming next?
No.
And what is coming next?
Well, one of the things, when I was just at that party, and everybody's talking about preparing, there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley that do think about the future. It's like what they do. I think something that's interesting is like when you look at how the media positions venture capitalists, executives running tech companies, there's always like stories about we're 10 years out from blah, 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 right? We're always 10 years out from something, which is by coincidence usually the life cycle of a VC fund, just so that you know. There's so much reporting that just takes this sort of like blind faith, like, oh, that these people know what they're talking about and they're designing the future, and like not taking a step back and questioning like, why should they be defining what the narrative of the future looks like when we are all going to be put in it? And why is it that engineering is the thing that defines the future, not how we relate to one another as a society, not our values and morals and who we are as a people and a culture? That is part and parcel of what a society is and what the future is going to be.
And where is that failure? Where is our responsibility? And by our, I actually mean the media, because that's what I spend a lot of time obsessing about. What did we do wrong? Where, how can we do better? Part of the reason why we try to work with people like yourself is because we have ourselves put out, we are in, all of us are siloed out.
I think one of the problems is that so many people in the media don't listen to what's literally being said to them, and then we clutch our pearls and are shocked when like big tech starts to like take everything over. If you look at like Peter Thiel, for example, for over a decade, he's been saying, we need to get rid of democracy. It doesn't work. You have people like Mark Andreessen, quoting from co-founders of fascist parties in his Tech Optimist manifesto, and
out in the open.
One of the things that I like ask journalists often when they're covering stories is like, if a tech executive didn't say this, if like the CEO of like some bland Fortune 500 company said this, would this be shocking? So if you have like the CEO of Ford Motor Company coming out and saying, we envision that we are going to like unemploy half of the population, right? Like that would be something interesting that would probably be clocked, right? Not just sort of, oh, okay, right? If you had...
And yet Sam Altman stands in front of the Congress.
And says, and literally, I was shocked watching that hearing. He goes, we are going to unemploy most people in your country. And you have the representative of those same people just sitting and taking it. And not going, why do you get to decide that?
So
why are you entitled to disemploy people? And even further, when you look at the insane, crazy talk that is now emerging and becoming mainstream in Silicon Valley, where you have people talking quite plainly about wanting to live forever, integrating us into machines, transhumanism, I mean, imagine if you had like the CEO of an insurance company come out and say, I think God is going to emerge in our servers. Because not just one, multiple tech founders have said that now. Elon Musk said that. He said that actually on stage, and it just kind of went over people's heads. You know, you think the most powerful person in the world right now, the richest person, he has all of these companies, and he thinks that a divine presence is going to emerge in his servers, and that's not worth sort of picking at a little bit. And when you look at all of the sort of weird shit that's going down in the Valley, you know, I feel like there is this sort of, I don't really know what word to use, whether it's a cult, a neo-religious movement, whatever. But when you talk to people in the Valley about AI and artificial general intelligence, this idea that we are going to sort of eventually reach what they call the singularity point, which is the point where AI surpasses human capacity, surpasses human intelligence, surpasses human knowledge, and we become the second most intelligent thing on our planet. But then that being infused into every sensor, every device, every sort of aspect, right? When you go into your living room and you sit down and you watch a TV, the TV's watching you and thinking about you and having a conversation with this wider intelligence which is watching you, and then making choices for you, right? And then you couple that with companies like Neuralink, with people like Brian Johnson who wants to live forever, and this idea
He's
that...
not the only one who wants to live forever.
There's a lot of funding now. They call it longevity, but the whole idea is about defeating death. And so on one hand, you have something about creating the supreme intelligence, or as Elon Musk puts it, being able to seed consciousness through the universe. You have all of this research into longevity and biohacking with the purpose of like trying to maximally extend the biological lifespan of a person. Not so that we can live forever in our physical bodies, but to buy time until we can integrate with this superintelligence. And when you listen to founders, whether it is Sam Altman or Elon Musk, they all kind of have this like religious tinge to what they're talking about. People since the dawn of time have talked about defeating death, creating immortality, integrating ourselves with divine superintelligence, something that sees us and thinks about us, and we merge with that. It was Brian Johnson actually that said that we've got it wrong. God didn't create man, man's going to create God. And when you think about that, and you think about that huge amounts of money, huge amounts of power is going into this little bubble where they all talk amongst themselves and develop very cultish ideas. And this is what they want to extend as an experiment onto society. And you have journalists sitting here when they tell you that they don't believe in democracy, that they want an autocracy, that they celebrate founders of fascist movements out in the open, put it in writing, say it on stage, and no one questions it, I think is really scary.
Do you have an explanation why we have not done a better job questioning it? Because ultimately, you know, I always think,
I think
for me, our biggest role is to hold powerful to account, and yet the most powerful group of men who exist in the world right now,
who are fascists,
right? And
who celebrate fascists, and that's not
missed a moment where we could hold them to.
You know, and I don't say that flippantly, right? You have someone like Mark Andreessen, who is one of the most powerful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, quite openly in his manifesto celebrating fascists. And there's always been historically this sort of weird interplay between fascists and futurists, right? I think one of the things that people get wrong about fascism is that it's about looking back into the past. But when you actually really read fascist narratives, it's about creating a powerful future. And when you look at the narratives of Silicon Valley, this idea of having a founder, that founder is going to, you know, break through society. You know, weak people need to step aside because this person has a vision and they're going to impose it onto society, like it or not. and we're going to fund that, right? It's a very fascistic sort of view of leadership. And when you look at like history, like the Italian Fascist Party was co-founded by the futurist movement. Back in like the 1930s, the fascists were obsessed with like cars, rocket ships, and eugenics. And today it's just self-driving cars and rocket ships to Mars. And instead of eugenics, we've rebranded it as longevity or transhumanism, but it's all the same. And for me, that's really scary.
So what do we do?
I think looking at that technology, it's not about an algorithm, it's not about a platform, it's about the underlying ideology of the design. I think there's very little questioning on the motives around engineering and design, that this is deeply political. One of the things that I tell people is I say, you know, we don't have a different internet, so we can't really compare it. But imagine if at the beginning of the internet,
But we did.
feminists were in charge,
Right.
right? What would a feminist internet look like? What would a feminist algorithm look like? These are design choices, and the standard which influences how engineers create things is this sort of very hyper-capitalist view of separating people, narrowing them down, limiting their choices until they behave exactly how you want them to. There's an underlying ideology of control that's in software engineering that is deeply political. And when I listen to sort of journalists in the media talk about technology, they sort of like obscure the fact that this is actually a deeply political thing, that these are political artifacts.
Yeah, and we talk about algorithms as this like amorphous thing that sort of exists on its own and is now ruling our lives. And AI is also this amorphous. We almost sort of, even all the words we used to describe, whereas, you know, what I really love about the way you guys did the podcast, and at some point it would be great to get the QR code. We have a QR code. Unfortunately and ironically, the podcast called Captured is captured on the Audible platform. So if you have the account, or you can get a free trial and listen to it, and it's really worth a listen. And one of the things that we did, we intentionally put Chris in collaboration with a reporter who's not a tech reporter. We did not want a tech reporter because we wanted this to be a story about politics and values and
even
society.
just the idea of having a tech reporter, right? Like, if you think back like 100 years ago when cities were electrifying, right? And we were creating electricity into every single building, right? It would be weird to say like, oh, I'm on the electricity beat, right? Like, I'm an electricity reporter. And it would be weird. I'm trying to imagine what those stories would be. Technology, I think, in data and AI, when we separate it and sort of other it as this like independent subject, rather than looking at it as how it is now the medium of our culture, it is the medium of our society. Like, it's a very sort of like almost 90s view of like digital being this other thing, and then there's the real world. The digital is just as real as the physical world.
And you know that like that's another interesting thing.
And looking at it as a political topic, right? Look at one of the when you look at, for example, climate change as an example, right? Which is another problem where it's really big, it's amorphous. There's all these like slow changes that are happening, and we're talking about problems that are going to happen in the future and that we need to prevent. If you reported that like tech, right, where it was just around like combustion engines and combustion engine companies and factories and which is how originally a lot of the reporting back in the 80s and 70s about climate and pollution and all that was. But over time, we've realized that this is actually like a deeply political subject, and that we now demand our leaders have positions and propose solutions to these problems. in a way that I don't think we do right now with AI and technology.
So you're almost saying that we need to take AI out of the conversation about AI. We need to take technology out of the conversation about AI.
In a way, yes, because it's actually about power and relationships at its core. Defining the relationships that we have with technology and having society have that input. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that we just, I mean, if you imagine like a platform like Facebook, right? And imagine it as a physical building that you were walking into. Imagine if we allowed, you know, a building to put a novel of terms and conditions in the lobby, and as soon as you open the door, you waive all your rights and it's in that novel over there. And then it's a maze and you're trapped inside and you can't leave. And also there's entrances for gays, Jews, blacks, and they all have different experiences, and you've completely segregated them and they don't talk. And then, you know, you have all kinds of things that warp their, it would not be allowed. We also,
and that would be illegal.
We also, there are so many things in AI that would be unlawful if it were to happen with a person that is still, that we don't clock, right? We sit there, and when you look at like the pandemic, for example, right? And you had AIs actively deceiving people to the point where they are harming themselves or endangering others by, you know, not taking a vaccine, not believing that anything is real, and then succumbing to, you know, a deadly illness, where the lies propagated on a platform literally causes death, right? If I went onto, you know, any TV channel and put out an ad that said, COVID's not real, don't take the vaccine, rely on this information, they're all lying to you, and then people relied on that information, I'd get sued. I'd get sued and I'd be liable for endangering those people. But when an AI does it,
the counter-argument here is often that this stuff is so new that regulators just don't know how to regulate. Legislators, policymakers don't know how to regulate.
Bullshit. Every innovation de facto comes in an unregulated environment. When there was airplanes invented, there was no FAA. But like, we didn't sit there and go, oh, like, how do airplanes fly? It's so complicated. I don't know. We're just going to let them do their thing. Right? We don't. There is a very deliberate narrative that is being pushed out from the Valley, which is that all these politicians are stupid. They don't know what to do. Look at how dumb they are when they ask us questions. And we know what we're doing because we have the technical expertise. In no other industry do we regulate companies through congressional hearings. We create regulators that are technically competent, that understand the technology, to then create rules that evolve with that technology. But we do not have regulators specifically for AI. We do not have technically competent regulators. In Europe, kind of, but it's all limited into sort of these areas of like data protection, and it's a much bigger area than that. There is no like FAA for AI. And it's a very deliberate dynamic because then, you know, imagine if we regulated like pharmaceutical safety with hearings in Congress, where like they call the scientists and it's like, explain the isomer of your molecule and like, is it safe or not? It would be insane. But that's literally what we're doing with AI.
But now, and it's so important for some of that regulation to come from the US where this technology is being born, and now, but now with Trump in power and the oligarchs sort of consolidated around him, the chances of that are non-existent. So where does that...
This is why we called the podcast Captured, because technology is capturing society in like so many different ways, from the micro to the macro, but there's also the industry itself that is capturing both society and how we think, but then also like now through the Trump administration, like the administration of the most powerful nation on earth, right? The vice president used to work with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was his boss. He has his entire career thanks to...
The man who isn't sure whether humanity deserves a future.
Yeah. And that I think is really... is scary, and that also what I find even scarier is that this is not being loudly debated and shouted about in the media. We sort of like accept that, like,
That's
for
because
some reason this industry, because imagine if a different industry had done it, right? Imagine if pharmaceuticals had done it. Imagine if like energy had done it, oil had done it. If you had like the entire oil, industry putting in members of cabinet, sitting behind them at the inauguration.
And
We would
this
clock
being a
it.
media conference, so much of the media industry has actually gone to bed with the big tech, taken money from big tech, which, you always compare it to the green movement taking money from fossil fuels.
You wouldn't do it. If a journalist took money from an oil company, you would call into question their ability to be neutral and their integrity. But it happens with tech all over the place, right? You look at Google, Meta, all of these companies are now putting all of this money very deliberately into academic institutions, into think tanks, into media organizations, to entrench a narrative that creates an inevitability of them winning power. And that's, I think, deeply problematic.
I'm just checking on the time that we have, and we've got 2 questions. One of them I was going to ask myself, and one I'll keep for the last one. So, how do we act on it now? Like, what do we do? How do we get out of the mess?
The cool thing about humanity, I think, and like if you look at like the long view of history, is like we've had all kinds of like problems with power structures and we've gotten out of them. But oftentimes it's messy, and oftentimes it requires society to be pushed to the breaking point before it reacts in a much more aggressive way. And
how far are we from that breaking point?
well, I think it really depends on where the Trump administration goes, in particular with this industry, and what happens when. Just think about it for a second. Like, if you unemploy half of the population, what do you think that they're really going to do? Like, just sit there and take it? If you start with the media, all of these very smart people here sitting, and you think that everyone here is just going to sit back and go, well, I'm unemployed now. Sorry, I guess I'm going to have my, universal basic income from Sam Altman. And I'm just going to sit there and accept it. It's not, like we are on like a collision course for something like much more dramatic than I think people are really anticipating right now, or at least how people are talking about it in this sort of niceties of polite society. Because I can't imagine a society that will just sit back and take that.
So your hope is a revolution?
It's not whether I hope or not. I think when you look at human history and when you push populations to the breaking point, that's what usually happens.
Mm-hmm. We've got 3 minutes left, and there is a question. Tell us more about the party and what exactly these tech bros.
Oh, okay, we can keep it light. So,
I was going to say, well, you have to listen to the podcast.
So, like get your free trial of Audible and download it. I was flying from Asia to go to Perugia to meet you guys. This wasn't this year, like last year.
He did eventually make it to Perugia last year, yeah.
And my layover was in Dubai. So I was planning on just staying there the night and then flying out in the morning to Italy. But the week that I was there, it was crypto week. So it was like just filled. I don't know how many people have been to Dubai, but it's a very sort of bling, flashy place. But then you bring in all these bros with lots of money, and the whole city was just like one giant party. And the evening before, when I landed, I got to my hotel, and then that evening I started getting all these like super weird text messages from like the government, like saying like the civil service will not be going in tomorrow, like just the really weird like messages that I'm like, okay, well, I don't know, I guess people want to keep track of those types of things. And then this sort of storm comes, and then I'm like, oh wow, it's like I'm seeing rain in the desert. That's kind of cool. Next day, I get an Uber on the way to the airport, and it's like raining like terribly. And then the water just keeps rising and rising and rising. Ironically, I was in like an electric Uber, Uber Green or whatever. And we get to a tunnel right before the airport, and it's like filled with water, and there's cars with their doors open, no one in it. And I'm like, okay, this is not a good sign. And I'm like, I tell the driver, I'm like, I think we should stop. And he's like, no. He's looking at the GPS thing, and it's like, no, we're supposed to go through this way. And I'm like, I know that your car says this, but like, use your, eyes. We go in, car stalls, and I had to climb out in the water. And that's when I called you. I was standing like almost waist deep in water, wading through, going, what am I supposed to do? The airport's just there.
We're going to run out of time. You got to cut to the party.
Get to the party. Okay.
Cut to the party. Whose party? Tell them whose party
I didn't make my flight. But I then had to walk literally back to Dubai. Like walk, because there was no cars. It's just all flooded. So I walked in a flood back to Dubai, and I was like, who do I know that's here? And so I went onto Twitter and I was like, looked up who was in Dubai, and I just started messaging people. And so then one of my friends was like, oh, you should come to this like compound. We're like having a party. And I'm like, okay, the apocalypse is happening, but sure, why not? So I go to this compound. It has like a wall. It now has a moat because everything is water. So I'm going to like a castle here. And I go in, and outside it's just storm, fallen everything. Everything's like collapsed. And I go in, and it's just music, catering, like people. And there's all of these, tech bros talking about the future and investments, and they were doing deals. And it was hosted by a guy.
And they're going to solve the climate change that's causing the floods outside.
Well, that's why you go to Mars.
Yeah.
You leave. And when I was talking to people there, it was hosted by a guy by the name of Brian Johnson, who is the guy.
Can you raise your hand if you know who Brian Johnson is? Yeah, that's
he's the guy
incredible how few people. He has millions.
He injects himself with
followers.
his son's blood and does lots of other things to.
There's millions of followers. He's
or
the
as he
longevity guru.
As he refers to it, his blood boy.
Were they serving shots at the party?
They were serving longevity food, which was sort of like compressed things with supplements in it. It was awful. But the entire conversation at dinner, as we're eating our like supplement sort of soylent thing, was around how can we buy time? We need to buy time for our bodies. We need to buy time so that we can develop certain technologies. We need to buy time from society, look at what's all happening. And it was just this wild thing where you guys were in Perugia and you're talking about democracy and stuff. Outside was like a climate crisis. And then inside is just this party with these rich guys just going like, how do we live past it? Like, are we getting compounds? How are we setting it up?
Are we going to Mars?
Yeah, are we going to Mars? And I just like the insanity of it. But that some of these people are like the most powerful people in tech. And that it's not being clocked that like mad people are taking over. Mad people, crazy people are taking over. And, we giggle at it because it's kind of funny, this idea of these people, eating their soylent food going, we're going to live forever. But like, they've got the bucks to do it. And they also have the lobbyists, the infrastructure. They have your entire information ecosystem at
and
their
the White
control.
House now too.
And the White House and the vice president and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, that's actually kind of scary when you think about it, that these very cultish people with these wild, insane views are taking over and in charge of the entire infrastructure of our society.
Chris, before we go off stage, this room is full of incredible people, journalists, activists, people who are, doing amazing work. Very briefly, one word of advice.
Stop with the double standard. So if a tech bro says something, imagine if a different CEO said it. If the oil industry did this, would we accept it? Stop with the double standard. Understand that this is like a super political thing. It's not about the technology. The way that technology is being used is not inevitable. AI does not have to unemploy the entire population. That's a choice. That's a political choice, and it's an ideological one. And start actually questioning the insane things that these people are saying that they're going to do, rather than just brushing it off as, oh, they're just a bunch of weird autistic guys. Because they may be weird autistic guys, but they have billions of dollars and the White House at the disposal. And I think treating it as such is
Take
really
it seriously.
important. Take it seriously.
Christopher Wylie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.